Some stories are told with laughter, reminiscing about fond memories and joyful times. Others are shared with a heavy heart, serving as cautionary tales, their lessons learned through pain and regret. My story belongs to the latter category. It is a story of mistakes, a cascade of poor judgments that led to a place of profound embarrassment and lasting consequence. For my family, it is a tale of shame, a chapter they wish could be erased from our collective history. But some events are too monumental to be forgotten. They become a part of the family lore, whispered in hushed tones, a permanent stain on the fabric of our lives. This is not just a memory, it is a ghost that haunts the halls of my home, a constant reminder of a time when my life veered dramatically off course, leaving a trail of broken trust and shattered hearts in its wake. This narrative will live in my house forever. It is an indelible mark, something that cannot be simply wished away or ignored until it fades. It is the kind of story that gets passed down, not as a proud legacy, but as a warning. It speaks of the dangers of assumption, the seismic impact of secrets, and the devastating fallout of a heart torn between duty, desire, and delusion. The events that unfolded are a testament to how quickly a life can be upended, how a series of seemingly small choices can accumulate into an avalanche of disaster. The embarrassment is not just mine to bear, it ripples outwards, touching everyone who loves me, forever changing the way they see me, and perhaps the way I see myself. It's a heavy burden to carry, knowing your personal history has become a source of familial disgrace. The weight of this story is something I carry daily. It's in the quiet moments when my mind wanders back to the crossroads where everything changed. It's in the strained silences during family gatherings, where the unsaid hangs heavy in the air. This is the price of my mistakes, a debt that I feel I will be paying for the rest of my life. To call it a story of embarrassment is an understatement. It was a public unraveling, a personal crisis that played out on a stage I never intended to build, with an audience of the people I cared about most. The shame is a constant companion, a shadow that follows my every step. It is a stark and painful lesson, one that has reshaped my understanding of love, honesty, and the profound responsibility that comes with the choices we make. My hope in sharing this deeply personal and painful chapter is that it might serve a purpose beyond my own suffering. Perhaps in laying bare my vulnerabilities and my errors, another person might be spared a similar fate. It is a raw and unflinching look at the human capacity for self-deception and the chaos that ensues when we fail to communicate our deepest truths. This is not a story I am proud of, but it is a story that must be told. It is a chronicle of how love can be blind, how silence can be deafening, and how the truth, no matter how difficult, is always less destructive than a lie. It is a story that began, as so many do, with a simple, seemingly innocent meeting. A meeting that would set in motion a chain of events that would alter my destiny forever. It all began in 2020, a year the world remembers for the stillness and uncertainty of the COVID-19 pandemic. The world was on pause, but my life was about to be thrust into fast forward. I was working in a retail store, an electronics shop that sold everything from refrigerators to televisions. It was my aunt's business, a place of routine and familiarity. My days were spent assisting customers, managing inventory, and closing up shop with my aunt each evening. It was a simple, structured existence. Then he walked in. Let's call him Mr. A. He came to purchase an item, just another face in the stream of customers that passed through our doors each day. There was nothing particularly remarkable about the transaction itself, but something about him lingered in my mind. 2 days after his purchase, our paths crossed again, this time in a far more personal setting. I saw him on my street, a stone's throw from my own home. The coincidence felt significant, like a small nudge from fate. I recognized him immediately and called out, "Hey, hello, I remember you. You came to buy one product." A smile spread across his face as he confirmed it was him. He then confessed something that made my heart skip a beat. He had been hoping to see me again. It turned out he lived very close to my place. Another layer of serendipity that felt too potent to ignore. That brief chance encounter on the street was the spark. We exchanged numbers, and from that moment, a new chapter of my life began to write itself, its words fueled by budding attraction and hopeful anticipation. The connection was immediate, at least on my end. I was the one giving him the green light, making it clear that my interest was more than just friendly. I was drawn to him, and I wasn't shy about it. We started talking constantly, our conversations weaving a tapestry of shared thoughts and growing familiarity. It didn't take long for me to confess my feelings. I told him I liked him, laying my cards on the table with a vulnerability that felt both risky and exhilarating. His response, however, was not the enthusiastic reciprocation I had hoped for. He told me he wasn't looking for a relationship at that moment. His focus, he explained, was on making money, on building a future for himself before he could commit to someone else. His hesitation should have been a red flag, a signal to proceed with caution. Instead of pulling back, I pressed forward, albeit gently. I told him I wouldn't stress him about it. "Let's just go with the flow," I suggested, believing that my patience and understanding would eventually win him over. I liked him, and for me, that was enough to go on. I was content to exist in this undefined space, this gray area between friendship and romance, convinced that time was on our side. I willingly accepted the ambiguity, telling myself that our connection was strong enough to overcome his reservations. This decision, this willingness to accept an uncertain foundation, was my first major mistake. It set a precedent for the entire relationship, a dynamic where I was the pursuer and he was the reluctant participant, a pattern that would have devastating consequences down the line. Our situationship, as it could best be described, continued under these vague terms. He never officially called me his girlfriend, and I never pressed him for a title. In early 2021, our dynamic was tested by distance. He traveled back to his hometown, and I, under the guise of visiting a friend, arranged to travel as well, my destination secretly aligning with his. I had to lie to my family, specifically to my aunt, my big mom, with whom I lived and worked. I told her I was going to a friend's place, a necessary deception to facilitate my clandestine trip. The lie felt small at the time, a minor transgression in the service of what I believed was love. We met and lodged in a hotel. He never took me to his family's home, a detail that should have spoken volumes about his level of commitment, but which I chose to overlook. We had a good time, a fun-filled escape from reality, and that was enough for me. When we returned to Lagos in January, I slipped back into my life, working at my aunt's shop. She had entrusted me with a significant responsibility, asking me to help manage the business she had built. "You're going to help me manage this business," she had said, and I had readily agreed. She was a working woman, but she always made it a point to stop by the shop after her own job, and we would close up together before heading home. She was not just my aunt, she was my boss, and she was paying me for my work. This dual relationship added another layer of complexity to my personal life. Mr. A would sometimes visit me at the shop, and each time he did, a wave of conflict washed over me. I longed to introduce him to her, to legitimize our connection in the eyes of my family. "Let me introduce you to my auntie as my boyfriend," I would think to myself. After all, we had been in this thing for close to a year. It felt like the natural next step, a way to move our connection out of the shadows and into the light. But whenever I broached the subject, he would deflect. He didn't want to meet my family, not yet. He always had a reason, an excuse that kept our relationship confined to the private sphere, away from the scrutiny and expectations of our families. I should have seen this for what it was, a clear signal that he was not ready, or perhaps not willing, to integrate me into his life in any meaningful, long-term way. His reluctance was a glaring sign, but I was blinded by my affection for him and my hope for what we could be. This was the critical juncture, the moment I should have stopped and asked the hard questions. I should have asked him, where is this relationship going? But I didn't. I had been the one to give him the green flag, as I called it, the one who initiated the pursuit. I was afraid that asking for clarity would be perceived as putting pressure on him. I didn't want to seem needy or demanding, so I remained silent, allowing my assumptions to fill the void left by his ambiguity. I assumed his hesitation was temporary. I assumed his feelings would eventually catch up to mine. I assumed that if I just waited patiently, everything would fall into place. This silence, born of fear and assumption, was a colossal mistake. It allowed a fragile, undefined connection to masquerade as a serious relationship, setting the stage for profound misunderstanding and eventual heartbreak. The imbalance in our dynamic became increasingly stark. I was the one who did most of the work to keep the connection alive. I was the one making the calls, sending the texts, and initiating our plans. His responses were often delayed, his excuses consistent. "I'm busy," he would say. "I'm a tech guy. I'm always busy." His career became a convenient shield, a justification for his emotional distance and lack of availability. Instead of recognizing this as a sign of disinterest, I chose to interpret it as a testament to his ambition and drive. I told myself to be understanding, to be supportive of his goals. Let me still hold on, I reasoned, clinging to the hope that once he achieved the financial stability he craved, he would finally be ready to fully commit to me. So, our so-called relationship, or perhaps more accurately, our friendship, continued in this lopsided fashion. This precarious balance persisted until someone new entered the picture. Let's call him Mr. B. He wasn't a stranger. He owned a shop very close to my workplace, making us neighbors of a sort. For a while, our interactions were limited to casual greetings, a simple hi and hello as we went about our respective days. We were acquaintances, familiar faces in each other's daily orbit, but nothing more. There was no deep conversation, no shared intimacy. He was simply a part of the scenery of my work life. That all changed when he decided to make his intentions known, not to me directly, but through a mutual friend. He confided in her that he liked me, and his interest was far from casual. He wanted to marry me. It wasn't about friendship or a fling. His intentions were serious and unequivocal from the very start. My friend relayed the message, and I was taken aback. I immediately told her that I was already in a relationship with Mr. A. Her response was a question that cut right to the heart of my situation. "Is Mr. A serious with you?" she asked. "Does he want to get married to you? Or are you just friends with benefits or just friends?" I had no answer. "I don't know," I admitted, the words tasting like failure on my tongue. The truth was, I was unwilling to ask him. The thought of confronting the ambiguity was too frightening. At the same time, pressure was mounting from another front. My mother. She was growing impatient with my single status. "Are you not going to get married?" she would ask, her concern laced with frustration. Her words echoed the societal and familial expectations that weighed heavily on me. The pressure from my mother wasn't just verbal. She had taken matters into her own hands, introducing me to a potential suitor she had chosen, a medical doctor. I had never met him, didn't know him from anywhere, but my mom was insistent. I pushed back, telling her, "Dad, I am in a relationship." Her dismissal was swift and sharp. "Which relationship is that one?" "I don't know the person, I've not met him before," she retorted. Despite my protests, she gave the doctor my number. When he called, I told him flatly that I wasn't interested. This only angered my mother more, accusing me of chasing away good suitors. But in my heart, there was only one person I wanted. "But I love this Mr. A," I would tell myself, clinging to a fantasy I had constructed. "And Mr. A is the one I want." My stubborn loyalty to a man who had offered me no real commitment was a wall I had built around myself, a fortress of assumption that was about to be besieged from all sides. It all began in 2020, a year that the entire world remembers for its suffocating stillness and the creeping uncertainty of the COVID-19 pandemic. While nations were locking down and lives were put on hold, my own personal world was about to be thrust into a chaotic, dizzying fast-forward. I was working in a retail store, a bustling electronics shop that sold everything from gleaming new refrigerators to the latest flat-screen televisions. The business belonged to my aunt, a place of comforting routine and predictable familiarity. My days were a steady rhythm of assisting customers, meticulously managing inventory, and closing up the shop with my aunt each and every evening. It was a simple, structured, and uncomplicated existence that I had grown accustomed to. Then, one ordinary afternoon, he walked in. Let's call him Mr. A. He came into the shop with the intention of purchasing an item, just another face in the constant stream of customers that passed through our glass doors each day. There was nothing particularly remarkable about the transaction itself. It was a standard sale, a polite exchange of money for goods. Yet, something about him lingered in my mind long after he had left the store. It wasn't his looks or his words, but an indefinable quality, a quiet confidence that seemed to set him apart from the usual clientele. I found myself replaying our brief interaction, a detail I couldn't quite explain but also couldn't shake. His presence was a subtle disruption to the monotony of my daily life. In a world that had become overwhelmingly quiet and insular due to the pandemic, this small, insignificant encounter felt disproportionately significant. I thought about him more than a shopkeeper should think about a customer. It was a fleeting curiosity, I told myself, a momentary distraction from the anxieties of the time. The shop was my sanctuary, a place where I felt competent and in control, under the watchful but trusting eye of my aunt. The thought that this man, a complete stranger, could occupy my thoughts so easily was both unsettling and strangely exciting, a tiny crack in the perfectly constructed facade of my orderly life. I dismissed the feeling, attributing it to the boredom and isolation that had become the new normal for so many. He was just a customer, one of many I would serve that week. Life would go on, the shop would continue to run, and the memory of the man who bought an electronic appliance would fade into the background noise of my responsibilities. I focused on my work, on helping my aunt, and on the familiar comfort of our shared routine. Little did I know that this was not a fleeting encounter. It was the quiet, unassuming prologue to a dramatic and tumultuous chapter of my life, the first domino to fall in a sequence of events that would lead to unimaginable consequences. Just 2 days after his purchase, our paths were destined to cross again, this time far from the commercial setting of the electronic shop. The setting was now infinitely more personal, more intimate. I was walking down my own street, the very road that led to my front door, when I saw a familiar figure ahead of me. The coincidence felt like a jolt, a powerful and undeniable nudge from fate itself. I recognized him immediately, the man from the shop. Without a second thought, I called out to him, my voice carrying a mixture of surprise and eagerness. "Hey, hello, I remember you. You came to buy one product," I said, a wide smile spreading across my face as I approached him. He turned, and a look of recognition, followed by a pleased smile, dawned on his face. He confirmed that it was indeed him, and then he confessed something that made my heart flutter and skip a beat. He admitted that he had been hoping to see me again. The words hung in the air between us, charged with a potential that felt both thrilling and dangerous. As it turned out, the coincidence was even greater than I had imagined. He lived just a few houses down from my own place. This added layer of serendipity felt too potent to be ignored, as if the universe was conspiring to bring us together. That brief chance encounter on the quiet residential street was the spark that ignited the flame. We stood there on the pavement, the world momentarily fading away as we spoke. The awkwardness of a first meeting was replaced by an easy, comfortable rapport. The fact that we were neighbors transformed us from a shopkeeper and a customer into something more. It felt like a sign, a clear indication that this connection was meant to be explored further. Before we parted ways, we exchanged phone numbers. That simple act, the sharing of our digits, felt like a formal agreement to step into a new, undefined territory together. From that moment on, a new chapter of my life began to write itself, its words fueled by a potent cocktail of budding attraction and deeply hopeful anticipation. As I walked away, his number saved in my phone, a sense of giddiness washed over me. The world seemed brighter, more full of possibility than it had just minutes before. The pandemic, the worries of the world, and the monotony of my routine all seemed to shrink in comparison to the excitement of this new connection. I had no idea where this path would lead, what joys or sorrows lay ahead. All I knew was that I was eager to find out. This man, Mr. A, had appeared in my life twice in 3 days. A coincidence so striking that I interpreted it as destiny's clear and unambiguous endorsement. I felt I was exactly where I was supposed to be, embarking on a journey I believed was written in the stars. The connection between us was immediate and electric, at least from my perspective. I didn't hold back or play coy. I was the one who was actively giving him the green light, making it abundantly clear that my interest extended far beyond a simple friendship. I found myself irresistibly drawn to him, and I wasn't shy about demonstrating my feelings. We started talking constantly, our text messages and phone calls weaving a rich and intricate tapestry of shared thoughts, inside jokes, and a burgeoning familiarity. It was an exhilarating time, filled with the thrill of getting to know someone new and the intoxicating possibility of what could be. The initial spark quickly grew into a steady flame, fanned by my own enthusiasm. It didn't take long for me to lay my cards on the table. With a vulnerability that felt both incredibly risky and profoundly exhilarating, I confessed my feelings to him directly. I told him I liked him, putting my heart out there in the hope that he would catch it. His response, however, was not the enthusiastic reciprocation I had so eagerly anticipated. He was gentle but firm, telling me that he wasn't looking for a relationship at that particular moment. His focus, he explained with a serious tone, was on making money, on building a stable and secure future for himself before he could even consider committing to someone else. His hesitation should have been a blaring siren, a bright red flag signaling me to slow down and proceed with extreme caution. But I was too caught up in the momentum of my own feelings to heed the warning. Instead of pulling back, creating some healthy distance, or reevaluating the situation, I decided to press forward, albeit with a gentler approach. I told him that I understood and that I wouldn't stress him about it. "Let's just go with the flow," I suggested, foolishly believing that my patience, my unwavering support, and my deep understanding would eventually win him over. In my mind, it was a noble sacrifice, a testament to the depth of my affection. I liked him, and for me, that was a powerful enough reason to continue, to invest my time and emotions into this undefined arrangement. I willingly and consciously accepted the ambiguity of our situation. I was content to exist in this strange, undefined space, this murky gray area that hovered somewhere between a close friendship and a budding romance. I convinced myself that our connection was special and strong enough to overcome his reservations and the obstacles he perceived. This single decision, this willingness to build a relationship on such an uncertain and unstable foundation, was my first critical mistake. It set a dangerous precedent for the entire dynamic that would follow, a pattern where I was the constant pursuer and he was the perpetually reluctant participant, a lopsided dance that would ultimately lead to devastating consequences down the line. Our situationship, as it could only be described, continued to unfold under these vague and unspoken terms. He never officially called me his girlfriend, he never made any promises about the future, and I, in turn, never pressed him for a title or for any kind of clarity. I was afraid of disrupting the delicate balance we had established. In early 2021, our fragile dynamic was tested by the introduction of physical distance. He had to travel back to his hometown for a period, and I, driven by a desire to keep our connection alive, devised a plan. Under the guise of visiting a close friend, I arranged to travel as well, my true destination secretly aligning with his location. This required a level of deception with my family, specifically with my aunt, my big mom, the woman with whom I lived and worked. I had to lie to her, telling her I was going to a friend's place for a few days. The lie felt small and insignificant at the time, a minor and necessary transgression in the service of what I truly believed was love. We met in his hometown and lodged in a hotel for the duration of my stay. He never took me to his family's home, a detail that should have spoken volumes about his level of commitment and the secrecy he maintained, but it was a detail I consciously chose to overlook. We had a good time, a fun-filled and passionate escape from reality, and for me that was more than enough. When we both returned to the hustle and bustle of Lagos in January, I slipped back into my life as if nothing had happened, resuming my duties at my aunt's shop. She had placed a great deal of trust in me, entrusting me with a significant amount of responsibility. "You're going to help me manage this business," she had said, and I had readily agreed, proud of her faith in me. She was a hard-working woman, but she always made it a point to stop by the shop after her own job, and we would close up together before heading home. She was not just my aunt, she was my mentor and my boss, and she was paying me for my work, a fact that added yet another layer of complexity to my increasingly complicated personal life. Mr. A would sometimes visit me at the shop during the day, and each time he appeared, a wave of internal conflict washed over me. I longed to introduce him to my aunt, to finally legitimize our connection in the eyes of my family and the world. "Let me introduce you to my auntie as my boyfriend," I would think to myself, the words forming a silent plea in my mind. After all, we had been in this thing for close to a year. It felt like the natural, logical next step, a way to move our connection out of the shadows and into the bright, validating light of day. But my desire was always met with his quiet, unyielding resistance. Whenever I even hinted at the subject of meeting my family, he would skillfully deflect the conversation. He always had a reason, a plausible excuse that kept our relationship confined to our private sphere, safely shielded from the scrutiny and expectations of our respective families. He didn't want to meet them, he would say, not yet. Perhaps he felt it would create pressure, or perhaps he simply wasn't ready for that level of seriousness. I should have seen this persistent reluctance for what it was, a clear and unambiguous signal that he was not ready, or perhaps not willing, to integrate me into his life in any meaningful long-term way. His hesitance was a glaring, flashing sign, but I was willfully blinded by my affection for him and my unwavering hope for the future I had imagined for us. This was the critical juncture, the pivotal moment where I should have paused, taken a deep breath, and asked the hard, uncomfortable questions. I should have looked him in the eye and asked him directly, "Where is this relationship going?" But I didn't. The fear of his answer, or perhaps the fear of confirming what I already suspected deep down, kept me silent. I had been the one to give him the green flag, as I called it, the one who had initiated the pursuit from the very beginning. I was terrified that asking for clarity would be perceived as putting pressure on him, that I would come across as needy or demanding. I didn't want to risk pushing him away completely, so I chose silence over truth. In the absence of clear communication, I allowed my own assumptions to fill the vast, empty void left by his persistent ambiguity. I created a narrative that suited my desires. I assumed his hesitation was only temporary, a phase he would grow out of once his financial situation improved. I assumed his feelings for me were just as deep as mine were for him, even if he couldn't express them. I assumed that if I just waited patiently, if I was just understanding enough, everything would eventually fall perfectly into place. My entire relationship with Mr. A was built not on shared commitment or mutual understanding, but on a dangerous and flimsy scaffold of my own hopeful assumptions. This silence, born of my own fear and fueled by my own assumptions, was a colossal and foundational mistake. It allowed a fragile, undefined connection to masquerade as a serious, committed relationship, at least in my own mind. By failing to seek clarity, I was complicit in the construction of a house of cards. I was so invested in the idea of him, in the potential of what we could be, that I ignored the reality of what we actually were. This fundamental misunderstanding, this web of assumptions I had spun around us, set the stage for the profound confusion, the deep betrayal, and the eventual heartbreak that was to come. The imbalance in our dynamic became increasingly stark and undeniable. I was the one who did most of the emotional labor to keep our fragile connection alive and breathing. I was the one making the late-night calls, sending the hopeful morning texts, and meticulously planning our infrequent get-togethers. His responses were often delayed, his excuses becoming a familiar, frustrating refrain. "I'm busy," he would say, his voice distant over the phone. "I'm a tech guy, you know how it is. I'm always busy." His career became a convenient and impenetrable shield, a ready-made justification for his emotional distance and his chronic lack of availability. It was a perfect excuse, one I couldn't easily argue against without seeming unsupportive or demanding. Instead of recognizing this pattern as a clear sign of his disinterest, I chose to interpret it in the most generous light possible. I framed it as a testament to his ambition, his focus, and his admirable drive to succeed. I told myself to be the patient, understanding partner he needed. Let me still hold on. I would reason with myself in moments of doubt, clinging desperately to the hope that once he finally achieved the financial stability he craved, he would finally be ready to fully commit to me. So our so-called relationship, or perhaps more accurately, our deeply lopsided friendship, continued its unsteady march forward. This precarious balance, this delicate dance of my pursuit and his retreat, persisted for what felt like an eternity. I was living in a state of suspended animation, waiting for my life with him to truly begin. The status quo was maintained by my sheer force of will, my refusal to accept the reality staring me in the face. I poured my energy into a connection that gave very little back, convincing myself it was a noble investment that would one day pay off. I was so focused on the future I had envisioned that I failed to see the present for what it was, empty and unfulfilling. This period was defined by waiting, by hoping, and by the slow, corrosive effect of unreciprocated effort. The entire situation was a web of assumptions I had spun myself. I assumed he loved me but was just afraid to say it. I assumed his focus on work was noble pursuit for our future, not an excuse. I assumed that my patience would be rewarded with commitment. Every action, every word, every silence was filtered through the lens of my own desires. I was not in a relationship with the real Mr. A, but with a version of him I had constructed in my mind. This foundation, built on hope rather than reality, was incredibly fragile. I didn't know it then, but the ground beneath my feet was about to shift dramatically, as new figures were about to walk onto the stage of my life. The delicate equilibrium of my life, sustained by my relentless hope in Mr. A, was destined to be disrupted. The change didn't come from within my existing situationship, but from an entirely new and unexpected source. A new person entered the picture, a man we can call Mr. B. He wasn't a complete stranger who appeared out of thin air. In fact, he had been on the periphery of my life for some time. He owned a shop very close to my aunt's electronics store, making us business neighbors of a sort. For a long while, our interactions were limited to the simple, polite, and casual greetings that people in close proximity exchange, a simple hi in the morning and a hello in the afternoon as we went about our respective days. We were acquaintances, familiar faces in each other's daily orbit, but nothing more. There had been no deep conversations, no shared jokes, no inkling of any personal connection whatsoever. He was simply a part of the scenery of my work life, another shop owner on a busy street. That all changed one afternoon when he decided to make his intentions known, not to me directly, but through a mutual friend who often visited my shop. He confided in her that he had developed feelings for me, and his interest was far from casual or fleeting. He wanted, he said, to marry me. His proposal was direct and serious, with no ambiguity. It wasn't about friendship or a temporary fling. His intentions were serious and unequivocal from the very beginning. My friend, acting as his messenger, relayed the startling information to me. I was completely taken aback, stunned by the suddenness and the seriousness of his declaration. My immediate reaction was one of defensive loyalty. I promptly informed her that her message was pointless because I was already in a relationship with Mr. A. Her response was not one of acceptance, but a series of sharp, probing questions that cut right to the heart of my precarious situation. "Is Mr. A really serious with you?" she asked, her tone skeptical. "Does he actually want to get married to you? Or are you guys just friends with benefits, or maybe just friends?" Her words were like a dagger, piercing the fragile bubble of delusion I had built around myself. I had no answer for her. The truth was a bitter pill I was unwilling to swallow. "I don't know," I admitted, the words tasting like failure and shame on my tongue. The simple, honest truth was that I was unwilling to ask Mr. A those very questions. The thought of confronting the ambiguity, of forcing a conversation that could shatter my hopes, was too frightening to contemplate. So I existed in this self-imposed ignorance, pretending that not knowing was better than potentially hearing an answer I didn't want. Mr. B's directness and clarity stood in stark, glaring contrast to Mr. A's constant evasion, highlighting the weakness of my own situation in a way that was impossible to ignore. A new, powerful pressure had just been introduced into my life. While the unexpected interest from Mr. B created a new and localized pressure point in my life, a much larger storm was brewing on another front: my family, specifically my mother. She was growing increasingly impatient with my single status, a concern that she voiced with escalating frequency and frustration. "Are you not going to get married?" she would ask during our phone calls, her question less a gentle inquiry and more a pointed accusation. Her words echoed the societal and familial expectations that weighed heavily on me as a young woman. In her eyes, I was wasting my youth, letting opportunities pass me by, and she felt it was her maternal duty to steer me in the right direction. Her pressure wasn't just verbal, it was proactive. My mother had taken matters into her own hands, deciding that if I wouldn't find a suitable husband for myself, she would find one for me. She began introducing me to potential suitors she had vetted and chosen. The most prominent among them was a man she spoke of with great pride. A medical doctor. I had never met him, didn't know him from anywhere, but my mom was relentlessly insistent. "He's a doctor," she would say, as if that single fact should be enough to secure my interest. I tried to push back, to defend the territory of my own heart. "Dad," I told her, using a term of endearment, "I am in a relationship." Her dismissal of my claim was swift, sharp, and utterly contemptuous. "Which relationship is that one?" she retorted, her voice dripping with scorn. "I don't know the person, I've not met him before, and you never talk about him. What kind of relationship is that?" Her words were a painful reminder of the secrecy surrounding Mr. A. Despite my protests and my insistence that I was spoken for, she went ahead and gave the doctor my phone number, completely disregarding my feelings. When he inevitably called, I was polite but firm, telling him flatly that I was not interested and that he should not waste his time. This act of defiance only served to make my mother angrier. She accused me of being foolish, of chasing away good, respectable suitors for a phantom relationship she didn't believe was real. It wasn't the first time she had introduced me to someone, and my rejection of the doctor felt like a personal affront to her judgment and her efforts. But in my heart, there was only one person I wanted, one future I could see. "But I love this Mr. A," I would tell myself, my inner monologue a desperate mantra to shore up my resolve. "And Mr. A is the one I want." My stubborn, almost blind loyalty to a man who had offered me no tangible commitment was a thick wall I had built around myself, a fortress of assumption that was now being besieged from all sides by my mother's ambitions and Mr. B's intentions. I found myself caught in a tumultuous cross-current of competing pressures. On one side, there was my mother, pushing me towards a respectable marriage with a man of her choosing. On the other, there was Mr. B, a local and serious suitor who was offering me marriage and stability without any games or ambiguity. And in the center of it all was my own heart, stubbornly tethered to Mr. A, the man who offered me nothing concrete but held my affection completely. The weight of these external forces began to chip away at my resolve. I was being pulled in multiple directions at once, and the strain was becoming unbearable. The question my friend had asked, "Is Mr. A serious with you?" reverberated in my mind, a constant nagging echo that I could no longer ignore. My loyalty, however, remained steadfastly with Mr. A. I felt that I owed it to him and to the time we had spent together to protect what we had. The idea of betraying his trust, even if that trust was something I had largely imagined, felt like a cardinal sin. I convinced myself that the pressures from my mother and the advances from Mr. B were simply tests of my commitment. If I could withstand these trials, it would prove the strength of my love for Mr. A, and surely he would eventually see that and reward my fidelity. It was a romantic, foolish notion, but it was the narrative that kept my hope alive in the face of mounting evidence to the contrary. I actively pushed away the other options. I was curt with the doctor my mother had found, ensuring he would not contact me again, an act that created significant friction between my mother and me. With Mr. B, I was clear that I was unavailable, hoping he would respect my position and back away. I was drawing lines in the sand, defending a territory that Mr. A himself had never bothered to claim. My choices were all geared towards one outcome, preserving the possibility of a future with him. I was gambling everything, my relationship with my mother, a potentially stable future with Mr. B, on a man who had consistently shown me through his actions that he was not ready for what I wanted. This unwavering loyalty was, in hindsight, a profound mistake. It wasn't loyalty to a person, but to an idea, a fantasy I had constructed. I was so invested in the story I had written for myself that I refused to read the room. I ignored the clear signs of Mr. A's ambivalence and the genuine opportunities for happiness and security that were presenting themselves. I had made my choice, doubling down on my initial investment in Mr. A. This decision to remain loyal to an ambiguous situationship over a concrete offer of marriage would set in motion a series of events that would lead me down a path of even greater confusion, secrecy, and ultimately, devastating consequences. The atmosphere of my life grew heavy, thick with unspoken tensions and competing desires. My conversations with my mother became strained, each one a delicate dance around the topic of my future, a topic on which we were fundamentally opposed. She saw me as stubborn and naive, throwing away my chances for a ghost. I saw her as intrusive, failing to understand the depth of my feelings for Mr. A. At work, I felt the constant silent presence of Mr. B. Though I had tried to discourage him, his interest lingered, a quiet but persistent pressure in my daily life. His seriousness made Mr. A's casualness all the more glaring, creating a comparison that was increasingly difficult to ignore. Internally, I was a mess of contradictions. I defended my relationship with Mr. A to others with a fierce passion. Yet in my quietest moments, doubt began to creep in like a slow-moving fog. I would scroll through my text messages, analyzing his short, delayed replies, searching for hidden meanings that weren't there. I would replay our conversations, trying to convince myself that his excuses were legitimate and not just a way to keep me at arm's length. I was living a double life, the confident, loyal woman I presented to the world, and the anxious, uncertain girl who cried herself to sleep at night, wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. The pressure was building, creating a volatile concoction of familial disappointment, unrequited love, and newfound temptation. It was a perfect storm of emotional chaos. I felt trapped, isolated in a prison of my own making. I had pushed away my mother's advice and rejected Mr. B's offer, all in the name of a man who wouldn't even define our relationship. I had willingly painted myself into a corner, and now I was starting to feel the walls closing in. The path I had chosen, once so clear in my mind, was now becoming obscured by the gathering clouds of consequence. I was standing on the edge of a precipice, and the winds of change were beginning to blow with incredible force. This period was the calm before the true hurricane. It was a time of internal struggle and external pressure that primed me for a series of catastrophic decisions. My steadfast loyalty to Mr. A, combined with the intense desire to prove my mother wrong, created a desperate state of mind. I was vulnerable, emotionally exhausted, and yearning for some form of validation. This emotional turmoil set the stage for the next act of my tragedy, an act where my carefully constructed world would begin to spectacularly fall apart, leading to an entanglement that would change everything forever. The relentless pressure from all sides began to wear me down, eroding the foundations of my resolve. My mother's constant disappointment, my friends' probing questions, and the stark contrast between Mr. B's serious intentions and Mr. A's persistent ambiguity created a vortex of emotional turmoil. In a moment of profound weakness, driven by a confusing mix of frustration, loneliness, and a desperate need for some semblance of control, I made a fateful decision. I decided to give Mr. B a chance, not for marriage, but to see what might happen. It was a misguided attempt to quiet the noise, to perhaps feel desired in a way that Mr. A was unwilling to show me. I convinced myself it wasn't a betrayal, but an exploration, a way to test my own feelings and perhaps finally get some clarity. Our first intimate encounter was a clinical, detached experience. There was no passion, no spark, none of the emotional fire I felt even in Mr. A's most distant moments. As we were together, my mind was a million miles away, replaying conversations with Mr. A, wondering what he was doing, and feeling a profound sense of guilt and displacement. It was immediately clear that this was a mistake. The physical act did nothing to bridge the emotional chasm that existed between Mr. B and me. If anything, it only served to magnify the depth of my feelings for Mr. A, highlighting the stark difference between a physical act and a genuine heart connection. The experience left me feeling emptier than before, a hollow ache settling deep within my chest. Afterwards, I confided in my friend, the same one who had acted as Mr. B's messenger. "See, I don't think that I love this Mr. B," I told her, my voice heavy with the weight of my misguided actions. The connection just wasn't there. She tried to be encouraging, offering reassurances that were meant to be comforting but felt hollow. "Don't worry," she said, "you will come around. Sometimes these things take time to develop." Her words were a balm I wanted to believe, a justification for continuing down a path I already knew was wrong. I allowed her optimism to persuade me, clinging to the hope that maybe she was right, that feelings could be manufactured with enough time and effort. So, despite my better judgment and the screaming protests of my own heart, I agreed to see him again. A second time, we were intimate, and the result was depressingly the same. It was a mechanical act, devoid of the emotional intimacy I so deeply craved. The disconnect was not because Mr. B was a bad person or wasn't good enough in some tangible way. He was objectively a good man, financially stable and clear in his intentions. The problem was not with him. The problem was that my heart was somewhere else entirely. It was firmly and stubbornly residing with Mr. A, and there was simply no room for anyone else to enter. This second failure should have been the definitive end, but I was already caught in the current of my poor choices. The issue was never about Mr. B's qualities as a man or a partner. He was, by all objective measures, a great catch. He had his own business, he was financially secure, and he was ready for the kind of commitment that I claimed to want. He was stable and serious, offering a future that was clear and defined. The problem was purely internal, a matter of the heart's stubborn and illogical allegiance. My heart was completely and utterly elsewhere, entangled in the complicated, frustrating, and yet deeply compelling web of my relationship with Mr. A. No matter how kind or attentive Mr. B was, he was speaking a language my heart simply refused to understand. The emotional circuitry was wired to someone else, and the connection with him was impossible to forge. There was a crucial difference in how I approached intimacy with these two men, a detail that would later become profoundly significant. With Mr. B, there was always a layer of caution, a physical and emotional barrier. When we were intimate, we always used protection. It was a sensible precaution, but it also mirrored the emotional distance between us, a shield against deeper entanglement. With Mr. A, however, all caution was thrown to the wind. Our intimacy was raw, unguarded, and built on a foundation of implicit trust. We never used protection. I trusted his pull-out game, as it's crudely called, with a faith that bordered on naivety, believing that our love itself was a form of protection. This discrepancy in my behavior was a stark illustration of my divided self. With Mr. B, my actions were governed by my head. It was a logical, if misguided, experiment. With Mr. A, my actions were governed entirely by my heart, leading me to take risks I would never have considered with anyone else. The physical act of being with Mr. A felt like an extension of our emotional bond, however flawed that bond was. The physical act with Mr. B felt like a transaction, a hollow echo of an intimacy that wasn't truly there. I was living in two separate realities, with two different sets of rules, a dangerous game that was bound to have serious repercussions. After the third time we met, the futility of the situation became overwhelmingly clear. I could no longer pretend or hope for a change of heart. I had to end it. I sat him down and told him the truth, as gently as I could. "See, Mr. B," I began, "I don't see any connection between the both of us." He already knew I was in a relationship, as I had told him from the beginning. His response was startling in its confidence and possessiveness. He said it didn't matter that he was the one who would first pay my bride price, that he was my destined husband. He simply didn't care that I had a boyfriend. His certainty was unsettling, but my decision was made. This had to stop. My declaration that it was over did little to deter Mr. B's conviction, but for me it was a definitive line in the sand. I had conducted my foolish experiment, and honestly, the results were conclusive. My heart belonged to Mr. A, for better or for worse. I decided to sever all ties with Mr. B completely, to erase this regrettable chapter as if it had never happened. So I went through my phone and deleted his number, then blocked him to make sure he couldn't contact me. I wanted no means of communication, no lingering threads that could pull me back into that state of confusion. In my mind, it was over. I told myself, I don't know you, you don't know me. It was a clean break, a decisive end to a messy and ill-advised detour. I walked away from that final conversation feeling a sense of relief, believing I had narrowly escaped a complicated situation of my own making. I was ready to rededicate myself to my pursuit of Mr. A, to put all my energy back into the relationship that truly mattered to me. I had my answer. The brief, emotionless entanglement with Mr. B had only solidified my feelings for Mr. A. But, honestly, I was oblivious to a crucial and terrifying fact. I was not walking away unscathed. I was carrying a secret, a consequence of my actions that had not yet revealed itself. Not knowing that I was already pregnant, I cut the cord with the only other man I had been with, effectively erasing him from my life. The timeline was a ticking time bomb I didn't know existed. My interactions with Mr. B had taken place over June, July, and into August. It was at the end of August that I finally called it quits. The finality of my decision gave me a false sense of security. I had made a mistake, I had corrected it, and now I could move on. I was completely unaware that the consequences of those few encounters were already growing inside me, a silent testament to my infidelity and poor judgment. The past I was so desperate to leave behind was about to collide with my present in the most dramatic and life-altering way imaginable. This act of blocking and deleting Mr. B was a desperate attempt to regain control, to rewrite my own recent history. But some actions cannot be undone. The threads of fate, which I had so carelessly tangled, were already weaving a new and complicated pattern. By cutting off all contact, I was not only trying to hide my mistake from Mr. A and the world, but I was also, unknowingly, isolating myself from a truth that would soon become impossible to escape. I had slammed a door shut, not realizing that the most significant consequence of what had happened was now locked in the room with me. Life settled back into its familiar rhythm, but something was off. It was now late September, and I was at my best friend's house when a strange and persistent feeling of malaise washed over me. I was feeling intensely nauseous, a deep-seated queasiness that I couldn't shake. I felt completely unlike myself, my body rebelling in ways I didn't understand. It wasn't just a simple illness, it was a profound sense of being unwell, a disquiet that settled deep in my bones. My friend, seeing my distress, grew concerned. "What is going on?" she asked, her brow furrowed with worry. "I'm not feeling too well," was all I could manage to say, my own confusion making it impossible to articulate what was happening. My friend suggested we go to the local pharmacy to get something to settle my stomach. As we stood before the pharmacist, describing my symptoms, he listened intently. Before he could recommend any medication, he looked at me with a knowing expression and made a suggestion that sent a jolt of panic through me. He told us that we should run a pregnancy test first, just to rule it out before he could prescribe any drugs. The very word pregnancy hung in the air, a terrifying possibility that I had not allowed myself to even consider. My heart began to pound in my chest, a frantic drumbeat of fear and denial. We bought the test and went back to my friend's house to get the result. The few minutes we had to wait felt like an eternity, each second stretching out, thick with dread. Then, the lines appeared, clear and unambiguous. It was positive. The ground seemed to just open up beneath my feet, threatening to swallow me whole. A wave of pure, unadulterated panic washed over me. I felt like I couldn't breathe. God, I thought, let me just disappear. I had no idea what I was going to tell my people. How could I possibly explain this to my aunt, who had entrusted me with so much, who had never even seen me with a guy in any serious capacity? The secret was out, at least to me and my friend, and it was 1,000 times worse than I could have ever imagined. The positive result plunged me into a state of utter confusion and terror. The most immediate and pressing question was, who was the father? My mind raced, frantically trying to make sense of the impossible. Mr. A, the man I loved, was always so careful, so skilled with his pull-out game. We had been together for years without a single scare. Then there was Mr. B. We had only been together a few times, and he had always used protection. How could this have happened? The logic didn't add up, and the uncertainty was a special kind of torture. I was pregnant, and I had no idea whose child I was carrying. This was no longer just a story of a mistake. It was a story of a monumental, life-altering consequence. The panic was overwhelming, but my friend remained a steady presence. "Babe, calm down," he urged, though his words felt like they were coming from a great distance. "How can I calm down?" I shot back, my voice trembling. "The rule in my house is very strict. This will destroy everything." We sat down, the positive test lying between us like a verdict. He then asked the most practical and terrifying question of all. "Do you really want to keep this child?" The question hit me with the force of a physical blow. Abortion was not something I had ever considered for myself, but suddenly, it felt like a potential escape route from the impending shame and disaster. I was trapped, and every option felt like a different kind of damnation. The confusion over the paternity was a torment all its own. Mr. A was so good at his pull-out game, a phrase that now sounded utterly foolish and reckless, and Mr. B, he always used protection. Always. The two facts warred in my mind, creating a paradox with no logical solution. Had Mr. A's luck finally run out, or had something gone wrong with the protection with Mr. B? The what-ifs swirled in my head, a dizzying carousel of fear. I needed to know. I had to talk to Mr. B, despite having deleted and blocked his number. I needed to ask him the question that was now burning a hole in my soul. I asked my best friend to undertake a mission for me. I couldn't bring myself to go near Mr. B's shop, so I begged her to go for me. "Go to his place of business," I pleaded. "Copy the number from the sign on his shop and send it back to me. I need to call him." She agreed, understanding the urgency of my situation. A short while later, his number appeared on my phone screen. My hand was shaking as I dialed, my heart pounding with a mixture of dread and a desperate need for answers. When he answered, I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I got straight to the point, my voice tight with anxiety. "The last time we met," I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "did you in any way remove the condom?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, a silence that stretched for an eternity. His answer, when it finally came, was the most terrifying response he could have possibly given. He was not sure, he said. "You're not sure of what?" I demanded, my voice rising in panic. His uncertainty was worse than a yes or a no. It was a confirmation that the one safeguard I thought I had was not a guarantee at all. The possibility that the child could be his, once a remote and illogical fear, now became a very real and terrifying probability. The web of my own making had just become infinitely more tangled. Mr. B's hesitant, uncertain response plunged me into a new depth of despair. The ambiguity was a form of torture, leaving me suspended between two terrifying possibilities. Was the baby Mr. A's, the result of a single miscalculation in a game we had played for years? Or was it Mr. B's, the result of a deceit I hadn't even been aware of? This gnawing doubt began to fester deep within my spirit. It wasn't just a fleeting thought, it was a persistent, unwelcome witness to my transgression, a constant whisper in the back of my mind that I couldn't silence. The joy and anticipation that should accompany a pregnancy were replaced by a cold, creeping dread. This internal turmoil was compounded by Mr. A's own reaction when I finally gathered the courage to tell him I was pregnant. I presented the child as his without a shadow of a doubt, burying my own fears deep down. While he was supportive, there was a flicker of something in his eyes, a question, a reservation. At one point, he said something that confirmed my deepest fears. He told me, "We're going to do a DNA test after the baby is born." He said it calmly, almost as a matter of fact, but the words struck me like lightning. His immediate suggestion of a test revealed that he too harbored a kernel of doubt, or perhaps it was just his practical tech guy nature demanding empirical proof. On the outside, I projected an air of confidence and indignation. "No problem," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "You want a DNA test? We will have a DNA test." I played the part of the wrongly accused partner, offended that he would even question my fidelity. But on the inside, a storm was raging. The thought that had been a quiet whisper was now a deafening roar. Good God, what if this baby is not for Mr. A? His request for a DNA test transformed my secret, internal fear into a future, unavoidable confrontation with the truth. The clock was now officially ticking towards a day of reckoning. The The consequences of such a revelation would be catastrophic. It would not be good at all. It would be the end of everything. My relationship with Mr. A, the man I loved so deeply, would be shattered beyond repair. He would see me as a liar and a cheat. My family, especially my aunt and my mother, would be engulfed in a level of shame and embarrassment that I couldn't even bear to imagine. The entire fragile world I had built, propped up by secrets and assumptions, would come crashing down around me. I was carrying more than just a child. I was carrying a secret that had the power to detonate my entire life. The weight of my secret grew heavier with each passing day of the pregnancy. I was living with Mr. A, sharing a home and a life under a cloud of unspoken fear. He was supportive, attentive even, but there was an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite name. It was a watchfulness, a quiet intensity in his gaze that made my skin crawl. The questions, when they came, were never direct accusations but felt like carefully placed probes designed to test the foundations of my story. One evening, as we sat in the quiet of our living room, he turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Have you ever cheated on me?" he asked, the question dropping into the silence like a stone. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The question came while we were living together, in the intimate space that was supposed to be our sanctuary. His words hung in the air, demanding an answer I could not give. I felt like a suspect in an interrogation room, the spotlight bright and unforgiving. "Is there anything you want to tell me?" he would ask at other times, his voice soft but persistent. Each question was a fresh wave of panic. I wanted to confess, to let the truth spill out and relieve the crushing pressure in my chest. I yearned to tell him what happened, to explain the confusion and the mistakes. But the fear of his reaction, of the love turning to hate, was a powerful gag that silenced me every single time. Instead of the truth, I offered deflections and excuses. "No, I'm fine," I would say, forcing a weak smile. "I'm just tired." Life, the pregnancy, anything became a shield to hide behind. I became an expert at changing the subject, at feigning exhaustion or a sudden craving to steer the conversation into safer waters. But really, deep down, I wanted nothing more than to open up to this man, to just tell him what happened and face the consequences. But I never did. The lie had taken on a life of its own, and I was its prisoner. I felt trapped in a narrative I had created, unable to find the courage to write a different ending, so I continued to lie. With every question, the falsehood grew more concrete, more solid. "No, I could never cheat on you," I would insist, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. "I have never cheated on you." I looked into the eyes of the man I loved, the man who was caring for me, and I lied. I made a conscious decision to bury the truth, to carry this secret to my grave if I had to. I told myself to just hope for the best and expect the worst. It's a strange and fascinating thing, the way the human spirit works, how it can compartmentalize and rationalize such profound deceit. I chose the path of denial, a path that led directly to a cliff's edge. As the pregnancy progressed, the specter of the DNA test loomed larger. My internal panic led me to do something I thought I never would. I re-established contact with Mr. B. I needed an ally, someone who knew the other half of the story. I unblocked his number and reached out, my message a desperate plea for a fragile alliance. I explained the situation, that Mr. A had insisted on a DNA test after the birth. "If anything should happen," I told him, "just be prepared. It could be your child." I laid the possibility at his feet, forcing him to confront the potential consequence of his uncertainty. He was one of only 2 people who could be the father, and he needed to be ready for the fallout. His response was surprisingly calm. "Okay, no problem," he said. He didn't argue or deny the possibility. He accepted his role in this chaotic drama, agreeing to stand by if the results pointed to him. This small assurance gave me a sliver of security, a flimsy safety net in my freefall. At least I would not be completely alone if the worst happened. I had a backup plan, a contingency for a disaster I was still praying would never come to pass. This secret communication with Mr. B became another layer of deceit I had to manage, another thread in the tangled web I was weaving around myself and everyone I cared about. Meanwhile, my life with Mr. A continued. We went through the motions of an expecting couple. He came to my family's home with his father, a formal visit to acknowledge the pregnancy and discuss our future. It was all for show, a way to appease our parents. We had already agreed between us that we weren't ready for marriage, that we would wait a year or 2. "I will go," he had told me, "but between me and you, we know that we are not yet ready." I had agreed, grateful for his willingness to play the part. He was being a good man, standing by me, and every act of his kindness was another knife twisting in my gut because of the secret I kept. July came, and I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. For a fleeting moment, the joy of her arrival eclipsed the fear. We were happy. "Oh, she's here," we celebrated, Mr. A beaming with what looked like paternal pride. He bonded with her instantly, his love for the child pure and undeniable, but the shadow of the DNA test lingered. One day, I was idly scrolling through his phone gallery, a casual act that turned my blood to ice. I saw a photo of a bank receipt. In the narration line, he had written a single terrifying word: DNA. My spirit felt like it left my body. The test wasn't a future possibility anymore. He had already paid for it. It was going to happen. Seeing that receipt was a silent confirmation of his deep-seated doubt. My heart, my very soul, felt like it had been ripped from my chest. Yet, I said nothing. I didn't confront him, didn't ask him about the payment. The moment to confess, to preempt the disaster, was right there, and I let it pass in a wave of paralyzing fear. I should have just opened up to him then and there, told him everything. But I kept quiet, choosing the path of silence once more, hoping against all logic that a miracle would save me. My mom was around at the time, having come from her village to help with the new baby, her presence adding another layer of potential shame to the unfolding drama. A few days later, he approached me directly. The pretense was over. "Babe," he said, his tone gentle but firm, "we are going to run a DNA test." It wasn't a question or a suggestion, it was a statement of fact. To maintain my facade, I agreed without hesitation. "Okay," I said, my voice betraying none of the terror I felt. "You're going to follow me to the hospital. The three of us are going to go." I had to play the part of the confident, wronged woman to the very end. The appointment was made and the samples were taken, sealing our fate. The wait for the results was the most agonizing period of my life. Every day was a torment, every ringing phone a potential harbinger of doom. Then, the call came. It was the hospital, and they called me, not him. "Your DNA test result is out," the voice on the other end said calmly. "We have been trying to reach Mr. A, but his number is not connecting. Please tell him that he should come to the hospital and pick up the result." My heart stopped. The verdict was in, sealed in an envelope, and I was the gatekeeper. I didn't tell him. For a few precious hours, I held the knowledge that our fate was decided, sitting in a hospital office just a drive away. My first move was not to tell Mr. A, but to call Mr. B. I had to activate my contingency plan. I told him that Mr. A had gone through with the test, and the results were ready. My mom was scheduled to return to her village that week, and a selfish part of me wished she would just go, so she wouldn't have to witness the humiliation that was surely coming my way. I wanted to face the storm alone. Mr. A must have eventually gotten the message from the hospital himself. He made a strange request, telling my mother, "No, let her stay. Next week she will go back." He was deliberately keeping her there. In my heart, I knew why. He was setting the stage, ensuring all the key players were present for the final act. I was filled with a sense of impending doom, a desperate wish for my mother to just leave so she could be spared the shame. I wanted her to go so that if my world was going to collapse, I would be the only one buried in the rubble. Let me be the one to bear the shame and the embarrassment, I thought. But he was insistent. She had to stay. The morning it happened, I was in the kitchen, trying to lose myself in the mundane task of cooking. I heard voices in the living room and stepped out to see who had arrived. My blood ran cold. It was an assembly, a tribunal. Mr. A was there, dressed as if for a somber occasion. With him were his father, my own aunt and her husband, and another man who was like a big brother to him. They were all sitting, their faces grim and serious. I stood there, holding my baby, my hands beginning to shake uncontrollably. The air was thick with tension, heavy with unspoken accusations. This was it. The moment of truth had finally arrived. His father spoke first, his voice low and filled with a pained anger. He didn't speak to me, but to the room, to my aunt. He held up a paper, the official report from the lab. Then my aunt turned to me, her face a mask of disbelief and hurt. "Why did you do this to him?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "You know how much he loved you, how—" The words of the report echoed in the silent room. The DNA test result was conclusive. He was not the father. The probability of paternity was 0, 99.9999% exclusion. He was not the father. The words hammered into my soul, each one a nail in the coffin of my life as I knew it. My aunt was bewildered. "What is going on here?" she demanded, looking from the paper to my face. "All this saying, I don't really understand. Make me understand what's going on." She began to berate me, her disappointment a physical blow. Why did I do this to Mr. A? He was there for me, he has been the one taking care of me, of this baby. I could not even say a word. There was nothing to say. There is no explanation for such a betrayal, no justification for what I did. The big brother figure pulled me aside, trying to get me to talk. Tell him what happened, he urged, but I couldn't. I was just crying, my body racked with silent, heaving sobs. Mr. A's voice was cold as he ordered me, my baby, and my mother to leave his house immediately. My mother pleaded for time, but Mr. A's father insisted we go at once. There was no room for negotiation. The verdict was final. We packed what we could and left, our lives shattered. In a small hotel room, my mother finally asked, "Who is the father of this baby?" It took me 2 days of silence before I could confess the truth. The hotel room was both sanctuary and prison as my mother waited for my confession. After 2 days, I finally told her everything about Mr. B, how it happened, the lies, the consequences. She listened in silence, her sadness deepening. Then she insisted, "Call him! He must come here before I return to the village." With trembling hands, I called Mr. B and told him to come. The next chapter was about to begin. Mr. B arrived, calm and detached, and agreed to a DNA test. We returned to the hospital, reliving the humiliation. The results confirmed he was the father. Mr. B asked if I wanted to marry him, offering to make things right, but I couldn't accept. His betrayal, removing protection without my consent, made marriage unthinkable. I refused, determined to face single motherhood on my own. I told Mr. B no, repeating that I felt nothing for him. I asked only that he care for his child. I withdrew from the world, weighed down by shame, unable to face my community. Months later, on my birthday, I realized I needed to seek solace and rebuild my life. Living with a kind uncle, I began to heal. Unexpectedly, Mr. A started reaching out. The story wasn't over. The lessons of humility and honesty were etched into my soul. My story is a warning. Never build your life on assumptions or lies. Ask the hard questions. Seek clarity. Dishonesty poisoned everything. One honest conversation could have changed it all. Secrets only delay and magnify pain. Always tell the truth, especially when it's hardest. The scars of dishonesty are permanent reminders. Let my mistakes be your lesson. Honesty is the only way forward. My life now is a quiet work of reconstruction. I am not actively seeking a new relationship. The thought of it is exhausting. The idea of having to explain my past, of facing the judgment of a new person as I recount the story of my daughter's conception, is a hurdle I am not yet ready to face. Why are you a single mother? Is a question that carries the weight of my entire history, and I fear that when I open up, a new man will only see my mistakes and not the person I am trying to become. So for now, my focus is singular. It is on my daughter and on myself. It is on healing the wounds and building a stable, peaceful life for the two of us. My relationship with Mr. B, my daughter's biological father, is functional but distant. He fulfills his financial obligations, sending money when I ask for things for our child, but the emotional connection is non-existent. He is not the kind of lovey-dovey, communicative partner I have always craved. Weeks can go by without him checking in, his presence in our lives reduced to bank transfers. I do not love him. The fundamental connection is not there, and it never will be. A marriage between us is impossible, not only because of my lack of feelings, but because our families, both his and mine, would never agree to it after the public disgrace. Our story is one of biology, not of the heart. And then there is Mr. A. The man I loved, the man I betrayed, the man who, against all logic, remains a part of my life. Our connection, it seems, is a stubborn and resilient thing. We are friends. We still talk. He knows everything now. The pressure, the loneliness, the fear that drove me to another man's arms. He has even apologized for the way he handled the reveal, wishing he had not subjected me and my mother to such public humiliation. He has a bond with my daughter, a bond forged in the months when he believed she was his, and it has not simply vanished. He still asks after her, a phantom father tethered by a love that was real, even if the biology wasn't. Our story feels like an unfinished chapter. The love I have for him still flickers, a persistent flame that refuses to be extinguished by the storm. But I know a future together is a fantasy. The damage is too deep, the trust too broken, and the families too wounded. Our families would be vehemently against any reunion, so we exist in this strange, poignant limbo of friendship, a daily reminder of what was and what can never be. I have made my peace with my mistakes, and I am slowly, day by day, learning to forgive myself. My life is a testament to the fact that our choices define us, but they do not have to be the end of our story.